The pork chops were still steaming when I heard my son tell the table that I couldn't be trusted to lock up my own store. He didn't say it to me. He said it near me, over me, the way people talk about a chair that started to wobble. Dad left the back door open again Tuesday night. Daniel told my sister Colleen, passing her the potatoes like it was ordinary news. Alarm never got set. Sal found it standing open in the morning. That's twice this month. It wasn't twice. It wasn't once. I had closed that store better than 9,000 nights across 32 years, and I knew the sound a deadbolt made when it seated, a small iron cough I could feel in my wrist. But I set my fork down and said nothing, because the whole table had already turned toward me with a softness that felt like a wet cloth laid over the face. "Is that right, Walt?" Colleen asked. I set the alarm. I said, "Of course you think you did." Daniel said, "Gentle as anything." And there it was, the gentleness, the terrible patient gentleness, like my memory was a child who'd wandered into the road, and he was the only one calm enough to carry it back. For 4 years, I had been handing him the store a piece at a time. The books first, after my wife Marion died, and I couldn't look at her handwriting in the ledgers. Then the supplier payments, the payroll, the online accounts, the passwords I could never hold in my head. He was good at it, smoother with the vendors than I ever was. And I've been grateful. That's the part that still catches me at 3 in the morning. I had been grateful. "Nobody's saying anything's wrong, Dad," he went on, buttering a roll. "We just think it's smart to plan a few things while you can still be part of the decision. That's a gift, being able to plan while you're still yourself. While you're still yourself." It went into me like a splinter under a nail, small and deep and impossible to see. I'd carry that sentence for weeks. I looked around the table and understood something that turned the food to paste in my mouth. This was not the first time they'd heard it. Colleen's sympathy was too rehearsed. My granddaughter's fork had gone still. Even the way my daughter Rachel kept smoothing the tablecloth told me the story had been passed around at gatherings I wasn't at, on calls that ended the moment I walked into a room. Rachel was 35, and she loved me, and she was frightened. I could see both at once. She'd spent her whole life trusting her older brother to be the steady one. "You do repeat yourself, Dad," she said quietly, not to wound me. "Last month you asked me 3 times whether Emma got into her nursing program. That one was true. I remembered asking, and I remembered the small hot shame of realizing I'd asked before, and I remembered deciding a proud man is allowed to ask twice about a granddaughter he loves. But sitting there, the true thing and the invented things got stirred into the same gray soup, and I couldn't tell any more which parts of me they were describing and which parts they were building. Only Emma looked at me like I was a person. 19, Daniel's daughter, with her late grandmother's stubborn jaw. When her father started about the back door again, she said, "But Grandpa doesn't have a key to the back anymore." "Dad, you changed the locks in April. You told me yourself." The table went quiet for exactly 1 second. Then Daniel laughed, warm and easy, and said, honey, that's not the point." But it was a point. It was a small, bright point, and I held on to it. Because here's what none of them understood. A man can misplace his glasses and still know the shape of his own life. I've forgotten small things all my years, the way anyone does, and Marion used to tease me for it, and not once had it been called a disease until the season my son needed a name for it. I drove home with my hands at 10 and 2 like a teenager taking a road test, checking my mirror twice at every stop, auditioning for my own competence on an empty street. I hated that they'd put me there. Rachel walked me out to the truck. She hugged me, then hesitated, and asked a question that kept me awake until the bird started. "Dad, do you remember signing the new operating agreement for the store? Danny said the 2 of you went over it in June. He said you approved it." I stood in the cool dark with my keys in my hand. I had never seen an operating agreement. I had never signed one. I was as sure of it as I was of the deadbolt's cough. And for the first time, I was afraid that being sure wasn't going to be enough. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I sat at Marion's old desk in the back office, took a legal pad, and wrote down every incident they had against me, one at a time, the way I'd count inventory, the back door and the alarm, the dentist appointment I'd supposedly forgotten in May, the store key I'd supposedly lost, an invoice I'd been confused about, Rachel's birthday dinner I'd missed in March, a payment I'd argued with Daniel over in April. 6 stones. Stacked together, they were meant to look like a landslide. I'm a practical man. I've spent my life figuring out why a thing won't work, and there's a discipline to it. You don't start with the answer. You start with a part in your hand. So I picked up each stone and turned in the light. The dentist appointment. Daniel had moved our whole calendar onto a shared app on my phone after Marion passed. When he set up and managed, I opened it. The appointment wasn't there. Not moved, not marked done. It had never been entered at all. But at the table he'd said he reminded Dad twice. I wrote a careful note beside it. Never on the calendar. The key. In April he'd changed the locks and handed me a new one on a blue tag. 2 weeks later, in front of Sal, he'd asked where my key was, and I couldn't produce it, and he'd sighed and cut a new one and said, "Dad, these are the only keys to the whole building. You've got to be careful." I felt like a fool. What I remembered now was that he'd taken my ring the day before to add the mailbox key. He said, I couldn't prove he'd kept mine. I couldn't prove I'd lost it either, and the not knowing was its own kind of vertigo. That's the part people don't understand about being made to doubt yourself. It isn't that you believe the lie. It's that the floor under every true memory goes soft, and you catch yourself gripping the arms of a chair for no reason. And here's the thing I made myself write down, because a man who only collects evidence in his own favor is building a lie of a different shape. Some of it was real. In February, I'd driven to the bank and sat in the lot a full minute trying to remember why I'd come. In April, I'd called Emma by her grandmother's name and not caught it until she went quiet. Those happened. I was 65 and tired and grieving, and I forgot things the way I always had and a little more than I always had. What I would not do was let the true handful excuse the invented pile. Both could be real at once. That was the whole trick of it, and I meant to learn the trick before it finished learning me. Let me tell you about the store, because the store is the heart of the whole thing. Grady Hardware is 9,000 square feet of the most useful objects in the world. Plumbing by the bin, fasteners by weight, paint we still mix by hand, garden in spring and ice melt in winter. I own it, the business and the building both, free and clear since 2016. 32 years of contractors who call me by name. For years ago, when Marion got sick, and then 11 months later, when she was gone, I couldn't face the books. So Daniel stepped in. He moved us to accounting software. He took over the supplier payments and the filings to pay vendors without chasing me for a signature. He became an authorized signer on the store's operating account. Not an owner, a signer. There's a world of difference, though I didn't feel it then. I'll name my flaw plainly, because a story where the old man is faultless is no use to anyone. I would rather lose money than have an uncomfortable conversation about money. My father was the same. It's a Grady disease, and it made me easy. That morning I noticed something else. Sal, who's worked beside me 20 years, had started talking to me the way you talk to a man in a hospital bed. Slower, a little louder. He'd catch himself and look guilty. Sal, I said when he brought me coffee, "You found the back door standing open last week?" He blinked. "What back door?" "No, Walt. Daniel said you found it open. Twice this month." Sal set the mug down very carefully. "Walt, I never said that to anybody." We looked at each other a while. 20 years is a long time. I could see him running the same arithmetic I was, and not liking the sum. I thought about the younger men Daniel had hired. Two of them had gone back to calling me Mr. Grady instead of Walt, the polite distance you give a man you've been told to pity. One had eased a box cutter out of my hand the week before, gently, as if I might hurt myself with a tool I'd used since before he was born. None of it was cruel. That was the craft of it. It all wore the face of kindness. And kindness is the hardest thing on earth to argue with, because the moment you push back, you look exactly like the ungrateful, declining man they've been warned about. Before Sal went back to the floor, he said the thing that pushed me from hurt into motion. Danny told me you've been having some trouble. Said not to make a thing of it. Just keep an eye. I figured he'd know. He rubbed his neck. I should have asked you. That afternoon, I checked the calendar one more time. No appointment. No reminder. Only the confident memory of a man who'd told the story so often that everyone believed the version where he was kind. I wrote one more line, and my hand was steady. Some of these did not happen the way he says. Daniel came by the store on Thursday with 2 coffees and a folder and that easy smile, and inside of 5 minutes, I understood the dinner had been a beginning, not an end. I've been thinking, he said, settling on the edge of my desk the way he used to sit on the kitchen counter as a boy. You should be enjoying yourself, Dad. You've earned it. What if you came in 3 mornings a week? Do the part you love, talk to the customers, and let me carry the paperwork and the money side, the stuff that wears you down. It was a generous offer. If you didn't look straight at it, take the customers, which is a joy. Leave me the paperwork, which is the power. Fewer mornings meant fewer chances to notice. I like the paperwork, I said, to watch his face. Something flickered. Since when? Since it's mine. He recovered fast. He always did. He slid the folder over and said we should get a few things in order. Put a second name on the last accounts he wasn't on. Give him signature authority on the equipment loan and the insurance, so he wouldn't have to bother me when I was out. He used that word 3 times. Bother. He was building a world where every piece of me was a burden being lifted. And this operating agreement, I said. Rachel mentioned it. From June. He didn't blink. We went through it together. Dad, you don't remember, but we did. Right here. It just formalizes the roles. So there's no confusion if something ever happened to you. If something happened to you. Another soft knife. And confusion laid down on purpose, so that if I pushed back, I'd be arguing about my own confusion. And who wins that argument? I said I'd like to read it before I signed anything. He said, of course, of course. I noticed later that the folder held everything except the operating agreement Rachel called that night, and I could hear her brother in her mouth. His phrases came out of her. Nobody's taking anything, Dad. We're protecting you. Danny showed me the calendar, all the things you miss. Rachel. The dentist appointment was never on the calendar. He never entered it. A pause. Dad, that's exactly the kind of thing. You're sure it wasn't there. And then it turns out it was. That's what scares me. And I understood the trap all the way down. Every denial I made became proof of the thing I was denying. He'd built a machine where my sanity and my confusion produced the same reading. There was no move on the board that wasn't also evidence. So I stopped swinging. You're right to worry, sweetheart, I said. Let's all be careful. I heard her relax, relieved to have her reasonable father back. It cost me something to say it. But you don't want to fight by throwing punches at fog. You find the ground first. That was the loneliest part, those weeks. I couldn't defend myself out loud without proving their point. So I went quiet, and quiet looked like decline too. I started coming in later. Not because I was slowing down, but because I dreaded the way the young men watched me cross the floor, waiting for a stumble to report. Some mornings I stood at the door with my hand on the cool metal push bar, gathering myself the way you do before a hard phone call, in my own store, the one I'd open 5,000 mornings without a second thought. Then I'd walk in and say good morning like nothing was wrong, and something was. Emma came by Saturday, officially for picture hanging strips for her dorm, really to sit on the stool by the register the way she had since she was small. Grandpa, she said, spinning a bolt on the counter, can I tell you something without you getting weird? No promises. She almost smiled, then didn't. Dad's been talking about you for a long time, longer than everyone thinks. I heard him on the phone back in the winter, before any of the stuff he lists even happened. He told Aunt Colleen you were slipping. That was January. The dentist thing, the door thing, those were spring. January. He'd started building the story before the incidents existed. He'd written the ending first, then gone looking for scenes to fit it. He talks to a lot of people about it, she said. Aunt Colleen, some of the store guys, and he messages people. Once he was showing Mom something on his phone, and I saw the top of the screen. It looked like one of those doctor portals. The blue one, like the clinic uses. He closed it fast. She shrugged. 19 and unaware she just handed me the thread that would unravel everything. I probably read it wrong. My stomach dropped the way it had the day Marion got her diagnosis. I thought about the proxy access Daniel had set up 2 years ago, after my knee replacement, when I was full of anesthesia and grateful for anyone who could talk to the nurses. He'd helped me register for the patient portal. He'd been so helpful. I'd never turned it off. Why would I? You don't turn off your son. I didn't sleep that night. Not from grief this time. From a cold, clear, unfamiliar thing. After I made coffee and sat in Marion's chair and decided I'd go see Dr. Ruiz. Not to be comforted. To read my own file with my own eyes. Dr. Elena Ruiz had been my doctor 6 years, since old Halpern retired. She was younger than my children and somehow never in a hurry. When you talked, she turned her whole chair to face you, which is rarer than it ought to be. I told her I wanted 2 things. To see every message in my own record, and her honest read on my mind, no softening. She pulled up my chart and turned the monitor so we could both see. Walter, before I show you anything, I want to be clear. What's in your record is your information. You have every right to it. She scrolled. We do have portal messages here. Several, over about 4 months, sent through the proxy access on your account. Read me one. She hesitated, then read, keeping her voice level. Dad's getting more confused. Left a burner on twice this week. Got turned around driving to the store he's owned for 30 years. Repeats himself constantly. Can't always tell an old invoice from a new one. We're worried he's becoming a danger to himself. Please advise on next steps for a capacity evaluation. The burner. I've never left the stove on in my life. I barely cooked since Marion. Turned around driving to my own store. Every sentence was a small, specific, wrong thing. Wrong in a way only someone who knew me could build. Because a stranger's lie is clumsy and a son's lie fits. There are 5 like this, she said. They read as though they come from a concerned caregiver. Did you write back that I had dementia? No. She said it plainly. Walter, I want you to hear this clearly, because I think a great deal has been said around you and not enough to you. I have never diagnosed you with dementia. I can't diagnose anyone from family messages. Family reports are one source of information, and they matter. I don't dismiss them, but they are not an assessment. When I get messages like these, my job is to take them seriously and recommend a proper, independent evaluation, not to hand down a verdict. I realize I've been holding my breath for 4 months. I'm not going to sit here and promise you'll never develop dementia, she went on, gentle but not soft. Nobody can promise anyone that, at any age. What I can tell you is that the way to answer the question you're carrying is to actually answer it properly. Would you be willing to do a real cognitive assessment? Not a few questions in this room. The full workup with a specialist. Yes, I said. I've been afraid to. I think I was afraid they were right. That fear is ordinary, she said. It doesn't mean something's wrong. Grief alone does remarkable things to sleep and attention. How long since your wife passed? 3 years. Feels like a season. She nodded slowly, then asked how I was sleeping, badly, and what I took for the knee, and whether I was eating. None of my answers were the answers of a man losing his mind. They were the answers of a man being worn thin. She didn't fill the silence with comfort, which I was grateful for. Instead, she said something I've carried since. A lot of harm gets done in the name of concern. Walter, concern isn't proof. When somebody tells me a story about a patient, my first question is the one you should be asking too. What does the patient say? You're the only person in this whole picture nobody's actually asked. So I'm asking, how do you think you're doing? It was the first time in months anyone had put the question to me directly, and it took me a moment to find a voice to answer it. Then I asked the thing I'd been circling, this proxy access. Who has it? She was careful. She told me she could show me my own account settings, but couldn't discuss anyone else's records. On my account, the proxy had been granted to Daniel, and when she checked the date, she paused. This was set up around your niece's surgery. 2 years ago. It's still active. It was never removed after your recovery. She looked at me. That happens. People forget. But it's your account. You can revoke it whenever you want through the clinic with your ID. 2 years. He'd had a key to a door I'd forgotten I ever left unlocked, walking through in the dark, leaving notes in my file that everyone downstream would read as gospel. I sat in my truck in the lot a long time. I didn't cry. I want to be honest. This isn't a story where I come apart. What I felt was closer to the moment a fuse blows, and a hum you didn't know you'd been living with suddenly stops. In the quiet, I could think, he hadn't been careless. He'd been consistent. And consistency, in my experience, is never an accident. The assessment took most of a morning, 10 days later, with a neuropsychologist Dr. Ruiz referred me to a soft-spoken woman named Dr. Adeyemi, who had me draw a clock, remember lists of words, connect numbers and letters in order while she timed me, and answer questions I won't pretend were all easy. I won't turn it into a lecture, because it wasn't one. Recalling 5 words after 20 minutes of other tasks is harder than you'd think, and I missed one, and my heart slammed like I'd failed a physical. But most of it I moved through cleanly, the way you feel a job going well under your hands. What nobody warns you about is the shame of hoping. I sat in that quiet room, wanting so badly to pass a test about my own mind that my hands went damp on the pencil. When she asked me to draw a clock showing 10 past 11, I drew it slow and careful, the way I'd measure a cut I couldn't afford to waste, then second-guessed the hands and nearly changed them and had to tell myself to stop. A man shouldn't have to audition to be believed by his own family. But I did, and I told myself that if the numbers came back clean, I'd never let anyone put me on that stage again. When the results came back, Dr. Ruiz went over them with me herself. There's no evidence of dementia, she said. None. Your score sits solidly in the normal range for your age and schooling. What the testing does show is some mild inefficiency in attention and short-term memory, and it lines up well with poor sleep, chronic stress, and grief that hasn't had anywhere to go. That's not a disease, Walter. That's a load. Loads can be set down. She told me the practical things. Sleep. Get my hearing checked, because I've been saying what a lot and straining to follow the crossfire, a loud table, and untreated hearing loss can look like confusion from the outside. Ease off the evening bourbon I hadn't mentioned, but she'd guessed. Move my body. Talk to somebody about Marion. And one more thing, she said. Review who has access to your portal, and remove anyone who shouldn't. Not a medical recommendation. A practical one. You have a right to control who speaks in your name. That afternoon I did it, at the clinic desk. With my ID, I revoked Daniel's proxy access, changed my password to something Marion would have laughed at, and set the login codes to come to my own phone. It took 40 minutes and 1 call to the helpline. When it was done, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long while. I felt like the owner of myself. I'll be honest that the paper didn't erase the fear. That's not how fear works. For days, I still caught myself testing my own mind, reciting the aisles of the store in order, checking the date against a newspaper like a man patting his pockets for keys he's already holding. But slowly the testing eased, the way a bruise stops aching once you quit pressing it. Then I started a folder, a real one, cardboard, the kind we sell in the office aisle. On the first page, I wrote the date in 3 words, no dementia diagnosed, and clipped Dr. Ruiz's summary behind it. Then the calendar screenshots. Then the 5 portal messages printed with their dates. Then a timeline in my own blocky hand. January. Daniel tells Colleen I'm slipping. Spring. The incidents begin. I wasn't building a case for a courtroom. I was building a floor to stand on. And then I did the thing I should have done a year before. I sat down with the accounting, alone, in the evening, after Daniel had gone home. Here's where my flaw and my discovery met. I'd avoided the books because they'd been Marion's, and then because they'd become Daniel's, and because looking closely felt like an accusation. But avoiding the books is exactly how you get robbed by someone you love. Daniel had never fully locked me out. He didn't dare, because it was still my company and my bank account. He'd simply made himself the man who handled it, which is a softer kind of lock. I still had my own login to the bank. I still had view access to the accounting software, even if I'd never once used it. I pulled up a year of vendor payments and started reading names the way I read a customer's face. Most of it was familiar: the paint supplier, the fastener distributor, the utility, the card processor, the wholesalers I'd dealt with for decades. But one name kept surfacing that I didn't know. Bellwether Sourcing, LLC. Payments every 2 or 3 weeks. Never large on its own. $2,200 here, $3,100 there, and even $1,800. Rounded, plausible, the size of a real invoice for real gravel or real fittings. I had never bought a thing from Bellwether Sourcing in my life. I'd never heard the name spoken on my own floor. I added it up rough in my head, the way you total a cart before the register does, and the number made me put down my pen. It was a great many 1800s. I didn't call Daniel. I didn't confront anything. I wrote the name on a clean page, underlined it once, and sat in the dark store I'd built, listening to compressor hum, feeling for the first time not confusion, and not fear but the cold, specific anger of a man who has finally found the part that doesn't work. I didn't trust myself to read financial records the way they needed reading, so I did the thing I'm worst at. I asked for help. Her name was Priya Nutter, an accountant a contractor friend swore by. The kind who does careful forensic work for small businesses when something smells off. I brought her a drive of exports in my cardboard folder, and I told her the whole thing plainly, including the part where my own family thought I was losing my mind, because I decided I was done hiding from embarrassing sentences. She didn't gasp or pat my hand. She just started working, which I respected. Over 2 sessions, she built a picture and explained it to me the way I explain a plumbing job to a homeowner. No jargon, just water and where it's going. Here's your problem, she said, laying the pages out. Bellwether Sourcing. Over the last 14 months, the store paid it 41 times. The invoices are in your system. Someone generated them, and they're vague. Sourcing services, materials procurement, no line items, no products, no delivery records. I cross-checked against your receiving logs. Nothing from Bellwether ever came through your back door. You paid for goods that never arrived because there were no goods. How much? She told me. A little over $94,000. Not a fortune to a corporation. A catastrophe to a store like mine, where a whole year's profit can vanish inside one bad quarter. It was a roof fund. It was the cushion between us and a hard winter. Priya was careful about the line between what she could and couldn't say. She could show the payments, the fake invoices, the missing goods, the pattern. She could show the vendor had been added to the system under Daniel's login and the payments approved under his signer authority. What she couldn't do, from my records alone, was prove who owned Bellwether. That's a business filing question, she said. You'll want a lawyer for that part. And you should understand, whoever set this up would have every reason to make sure that if you ever noticed, nobody would believe you. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. He's ahead of you there, I said. She asked, carefully, whether I understood what the number might mean for the store's survival, and I told her I did. I thought about Sal, loyal on wages I'd meant to raise 2 years running. I thought about the contractors who ran tabs with me on a handshake. Every dollar moved into Bellwether had been taken not from a faceless company, but from a web of small trusts people had built around my name. And that same week, the pressure came. Not one moment. A change in the weather you feel in your knee. Daniel started telling people I'd been agitated. He told Rachel I'd become obsessed with old invoices, convinced money's missing, real paranoid, classic sign. He'd turned it inside out. My looking had become a symptom. When I asked Sal to pull receiving logs for me, Daniel intercepted the request and told him kindly that we shouldn't feed Dad's fixation. Sal told me himself, because Sal had chosen his side, and it was mine, but it showed me the machine was still running. Sal did more than tell me. One afternoon, he came into the back with his cap in his hands and said, plain as a nail, "Walt, I've known you since my kids were small. Whatever's going on, you're not the man Danny's describing. I'll say that to anybody who asks, and to some who don't. It wasn't much. He couldn't read a ledger, and he couldn't fix my family. But it was the first time in months somebody had stood beside me instead of studying me, and I had to turn and pretend to hunt for something on a shelf, so he wouldn't see what it did to me." Then came the real setback. I went to open the accounting software one morning, and my access to the vendor and payment screens had been dropped to view only. Daniel had changed the permissions. When I asked, he was ready. "I did it to protect you, Dad. You were making edits you didn't understand and creating errors. And by the way, some accountant called the office. Priya something? You hired her and didn't tell anyone. This is what I mean. You're making big moves in secret and getting confused." He'd found out about Priya. He was fast. I'll never take that from him. But he made the mistake of a man who thinks he's already won. Cutting my access to the vendor screens meant admitting he controlled the vendor screens. And in his hurry, he forgot the one door that was never as shut, the bank itself, where I was still the primary owner, always had been. Software permissions meant nothing to the bank. That night, from home, I logged in directly and downloaded 14 months of statements before he thought to stop me. In the statements, I found what Priya said she couldn't find in the exports. One bellwether payment had bounced and been resent, and in the memo field of the resent transfer someone had typed a note to themselves, "Sloppy, tired human. Bellwether D. Grady, cover shortfall. D. Grady, not W. Grady. D. I printed it. I put it in the folder. I didn't sleep, but for once it wasn't the sleeplessness of doubt. Once you know a thing is crooked, you can see where every nail was hidden. I sat with my folder, with Emma's memory and Sal's, with Priya's pages, and I laid the two stories side by side, the one Daniel told, and the one that actually happened, and the seams showed. The dentist appointment I forgot. Never entered on the calendar. He controlled. He'd made the gap, then named it a symptom. The key I lost. He'd taken my ring the day before it had the mailbox key, asked for it back in front of Sal, and let me stand there looking like a man who couldn't keep track of the only keys to his own building. The invoice I was confused about. I remember it clearly now. He'd handed me an invoice from the year before, one already paid, and asked me to confirm we still owed it. When I said we'd paid it, he'd shaken his head, sad and patient, until I second-guessed myself. But I'd been right. We had paid it. He'd used a real document to manufacture a fake confusion. Rachel's birthday dinner I missed in March. He'd told me Sunday at 7. It had been Saturday at 6. I'd shown up as it was ending, apologized, and blamed myself while everyone traded that look. He'd given me the wrong time, and let the wrong time become my failing. And the question about Emma's nursing program. 3 times. That one was mine. Real. I'd asked out of pride and grief, and a genuinely tired mind. That's what made the whole thing work. It wasn't all invented. Maybe a third was true, a third exaggerated, a third built from nothing, braided so tight that pulling one strand seemed to prove the rest. If I insisted every incident was a lie, I'd sound exactly like the paranoid man he described. So I didn't. In the folder, I marked each one honestly. True, exaggerated or created. 3 of them were true. I owned those. You can't defend yourself with a lie of your own. The truth only holds if you tell all of it. Rachel came to the store on a Wednesday, and this time she came without her brother's phrases in her mouth. She came on her own, and she looked tired. Emma said something to me. She started, "About Danny talking about you in January, before anything happened. She sat on the stool. I've been going back through my own memory. The birthday dinner. I could have sworn I texted you Saturday. Then Danny said he'd handle telling you, so I didn't double check. I keep finding these little places where I trusted him to pass things along and never confirmed you heard them from anyone but him. That's not your fault, I said, and meant it. I told people you were slipping, Dad. I repeated it. And Colleen, my friends. I made it more real every time I said it. She pressed her hand flat on the counter. I need to know if I helped hurt you. I didn't rush to comfort her. That would have been easier, and it would have been a lie dressed as kindness. You did help, I said gently. You believed him because he handed you a version of me that was easier to love than a father you might have argued with. But you're here now, asking. That has to count for something, or none of us ever comes back from anything. She wiped her eyes. Then what do you need? Watch and listen. I said, don't confront him. Don't tip him. Just stop carrying his words and start noticing. She was quiet a moment, then said the thing that had clearly been sitting on her chest. The nursing program thing. Dad, you really did ask me 3 times. I latched onto that because it was real, and Danny knew it was real, and he used it. He'd bring it up every time I started to doubt him. One true thing, over and over, until it covered everything else. She shook her head slowly. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Not that I believed a lie. That I let one true thing make me stupid about all the rest. I told her that was exactly how it was built, and that seeing it was the beginning of being free of it. I didn't tell her about Bellwether. Not because I didn't trust her. Because I didn't want to hand her a weight before she'd chosen to pick it up. She'd have to arrive on her own, the way I had. 3 days later, Daniel made the move I'd been waiting for. He called a family meeting. He framed it as love. We all needed to sit down together, for Dad's sake, and make a plan while he could still be part of it. Sunday at the house. He told everyone I'd been getting worse. He said it was time to formalize control of the store before something happened. He thought he was calling a meeting to remove me. He was calling a meeting where I would set the table. I had 3 days, and I didn't waste them on anger. Anger's a fuel, not a plan. First I saw a lawyer, a plain-spoken woman named Frances Okoro, who did small business and elder work. I told her everything and showed her the folder. She was careful with me the way good professionals are. She wouldn't promise outcomes, and she wouldn't tell me it would be clean. Let me be clear about what's real, she said. You still own this company outright. You never signed control away. And about that operating agreement your daughter mentioned. If a document exists with your signature and you never signed it, that's serious. But we approach it with evidence, not accusation. I'll request a copy through the proper channel. Second, the Bellwether payments, the fake invoices, the memo tying it to a D. Grady account. That's potentially serious financial misconduct, and it doesn't evaporate because it happened inside a family. But how you resolve it is partly your choice. There's a lot of road between doing nothing and calling the police, and you should see the whole road before Sunday. She laid it out. As owner, I could remove Daniel as a signer immediately. That was mine to do. I could demand repayment. I could report it. I could pursue it in civil court. Or I could combine things. Real accountability without necessarily destroying my son's entire future, if that was what I decided I wanted. She was clear the choice was mine, and that I didn't have to decide all of it at once. She helped me do the one thing that couldn't wait. She walked me through formally removing Daniel's signature authority and putting a hold on new vendor payments at the bank, effective Friday. Quietly, lawfully, mine to do. Second, I organized a folder into something a person could follow in 10 minutes. Medical first, the assessment, no dementia, Dr. Ruiz's summary. Then the 5 portal messages, their dates, and the record that the proxy had been Daniel's and was now revoked. Then the calendar proof. Then Priya's findings, 41 payments, fake invoices, missing goods, $94,000. Then the bank memo. D. Grady account cover shortfall. Third, I talked to the 2 people who'd earned the truth. Sal, who agreed to come to the house Sunday if I needed him, and who could speak to the backdoor lie and the receiving logs. And Emma, carefully, because she was 19 and it was her father. Grandpa, she said, I'm scared for him. So am I said, and it was true. I need one thing, and only if you're willing. Tell the truth about what you heard in January. Just that. You don't have to accuse anyone. You just have to not unremember it when the room gets hard. She nodded. He's still my dad. He'll still be your dad on Monday, I said. Whatever happens Sunday doesn't change that. That's not what any of this is for. I'll be honest about my state that week, because a story where the old man stays serene is a lie that helps nobody. I slept badly. My hands shook sorting the pages. Twice I nearly called the whole thing off, because the folder wasn't really a folder, it was my son, and closing it meant truly accepting who he'd become. More than once I stood in Marion's kitchen at 2 a.m. and asked her what to do, and got no answer, because there are no hidden letters and no secret help in this, only the long habit of a good woman's judgment that I had to rebuild on my own. So I settled on a principle and wrote at the front of the folder, so I wouldn't lose it under pressure. Tell the truth. Protect the store. Don't become cruel. I practiced, too, which felt foolish for a grown man. I read the pages aloud in the empty store after closing once, twice, until I could get through the portal message without my voice climbing. I was rehearsing a speech. I was making sure that when the room turned hot, I could stay the temperature of a man simply stating facts. I'd watched Daniel win too many arguments by staying calm while the other person got loud. I wasn't going to hand him that advantage under my own family's roof. Sunday came. I got there early, which surprised them. They'd expected a confused man who shows up an hour late. Daniel had set the living room like a small courtroom. Chairs in a loose circle, Colleen and my cousin Ray present as witnesses to my decline, Rachel pale on the couch, Emma in the corner. He had a folder, too. His was thin. He stood and smiled at me with real warmth, which was the worst part, because I think some piece of him still believed he was saving me. Thanks for coming, everyone, he said. This is hard, but we love Dad, and that's why we have to be honest that he can't safely run the store anymore. I folded my hands on top of my cardboard folder and let him begin. Daniel was good. I'll say it plainly, because it's true and because I loved him and both live in me at once. He built his case with sorrow in his voice. The forgotten appointments, the lost key, the confusion over invoices, the paranoia, his word about missing money, the doctor who, he let the room believe, shared the family's concern. He said the word capacity. He said, I've carried this alone to protect him, and I can't anymore. Colleen was nodding. Ray studied the carpet. When he finished, he turned to me, gentle. Dad, would you sign the operating agreement now, so we can put the right protections in place? It just makes it official that I handle the business. I'd like to see it, I said. You've mentioned it since June, but I've never actually laid eyes on it. Do you have it here? A half-second pause. I can get it to you. You don't have it, I said, not unkindly. That's all right. Let's talk about what I do have. And I opened the folder. I didn't raise my voice. I promised myself no revenge speech, and a raised voice is the first line of one. I went in order, because sequence is everything. You don't dump a toolbox on the floor. You hand over one tool at a time. The medical first. 10 days ago, I finished a full cognitive assessment with a specialist. Not a few questions in an exam room. The real workup. I passed Dr. Ruiz's summary to Rachel, who read it and passed it on. No dementia. None. What there is grief and bad sleep and a lot of stress I've had good reason for. I'm getting my hearing checked Thursday, since it turns out saying what at a loud table isn't the same as losing your mind. Colleen stopped nodding. Then the messages. These went to my doctor through the patient portal, under proxy access that had sat on my account since my knee surgery 2 years ago. 5 of them over 4 months. I read one aloud. The burner, the getting lost, the danger to himself. I've never left the stove on. I've never once gotten lost driving to my own store. Whoever wrote this knew me well enough to make the lie specific. I let it sit. The proxy access was Daniel's. I revoked it last month. His face didn't fall. It hardened, which is different. Dad, I sent those because I was worried. That's not a crime, being worried. No, I agreed. Worry isn't a crime. Let's get to what might be. Then Priya's pages. Bellwether sourcing. 41 payments. Fake invoices, no goods, $94,000. I watched Rachel's hand go to her mouth. Then the bank memo, enlarged so no one could squint their way past it. D. Grady account cover shortfall. The room changed temperature. Ray finally looked up. For a moment, nobody spoke, and I understood the silence was doing work no accusation of mine could have done. These were people who come to the house believing they were there to help a fading old man sign away a burden. Now they were looking at 41 payments and a memo in Daniel's own shorthand, rearranging months of their own memories in real time. I didn't press it. I've learned that when the truth is finally on the table, the worst thing you can do is talk over it. So I let it sit, and I watched my son watch the room turn. Daniel did the things Francis had told me he would, and watching him arrive exactly on schedule was his own strange grief. He denied, "That memo doesn't mean what you think." He minimized, "It was a cash flow thing. I was moving money to keep us afloat." He rationalized, "The store was tighter than you knew. I was protecting you from the stress." He blamed the pressure. "Do you have any idea what I owe? The house, the cars, Emma's tuition. The restaurant I put money into went under and took everything with it. I couldn't tell you I was drowning." And he said the truest false thing of all, "I always meant to pay it back." Then, when none of it landed, he turned on me. "You did this. You never let go. You'd rather burn me down than admit you can't run this place alone." Here's where I did the hardest thing in the whole story. Harder than opening the folder. "You're right that I held on too long," I said. "You're right that I was too proud to learn the books, that I handed you the money because I didn't want to talk about money, that I let you carry things I should have carried with you. Those are my failures. They made this easier for you, and I'm sorry for them." I looked at him. But being a proud old fool who trusted his son is not the same as being a man who can't tell truth from lie. And I won't put my name to that lie, so you can keep that account open. Then Emma spoke, small and clear, from the corner. "I heard you in January, Dad, on the phone with Aunt Colleen, before any of it happened. You said Grandpa was slipping. It wasn't true yet. So how did you already know?" He had no answer for his own daughter, and the silence was the loudest thing in the room. Colleen broke it. She'd driven over certain she was protecting a failing old man, and now she looked at Daniel with something between horror and grief. "You had me telling people," she said. "At church, at the market. I told them Walt was going." She pressed a napkin to her mouth. "You used me to spread it." Daniel started to explain and stopped, because there was no version that survived being said out loud in that room. I told them my decision. Daniel was removed as a signer, effective Friday, already done. He was out of the store's operations and finances. He would repay what he could on a real schedule documented through Francis. How far the rest went, courts or not, depended on him now, on what he did, not on what he promised. "That isn't revenge," I said. "That's the bill coming due. You of all people understand a bill coming due." That was 7 months ago. Here's where things actually stand, because a story that ends at the confrontation is only half honest. The other half is the slow weather that comes after, which nobody films. The store is all right. Not rich, never rich, but all right. Losing $94,000 hurt, and it'll go on hurting a couple years yet. In the shape of a roof I'm patching instead of replacing, and a raise I couldn't give Sal as soon as he'd earned it. Daniel has paid back a little over $19,000 so far, on the schedule Francis drew up, most of it from selling the second car and a boat I hadn't known he owned. It's real money, and it's nowhere near enough, and both of those are true at once. I didn't put my son in prison. I want to be careful how I say that, because I don't offer as advice for anyone else, only as the choice I could live with. Francis showed me the whole road, and I took the middle of it. Full accountability, real repayment, a signed acknowledgement of what he did, and the door left open just wide enough that if he ever misses a payment or lies again, the harder path is right there and he knows it. I chose that not because he'd earned mercy. I'm honestly not sure he had. I chose it because I didn't want the last act of my fathering to be destruction. That was for me, not for him. He's not at the store. He may never be again. He took a job at a building supply outfit 2 towns over, which carries a certain sad symmetry, and we speak rarely and carefully, mostly through the arrangements. The last time he started to say I always meant, and I told him, not cruelly, that the sentence was finished, that intentions weren't currency anymore, only payments were. He nodded. I think some part of him was relieved to stop performing. Rachel and I are closer than we've been since Marion died, which is a strange gift buried in all of it. She did the hardest thing a person can do. She looked straight at the harm she'd helped cause and didn't look away. She went back to Colleen and Ray and everyone she'd told I was slipping and corrected it plainly, without excuses. It cost her something with a few of them. She reads the books with me now. Sunday afternoons, both of us learning the software neither of us ever wanted to learn, because we decided the family habit of hiding for money ends with the 2 of us. It isn't all mended. There's Sundays that stay quiet in a way they didn't used to be. But she shows up, and showing up is a currency now. Emma's in her nursing program, the one I asked about 3 times and would happily ask about a 4th. She comes by the store and sits on the stool. She never treated me like glass. Not once. I told her she'd been the first person to look at me like a man instead of diagnosis, and she shrugged and said, "You're just Grandpa," which is the finest thing anybody said to me in years. She still calls her father on Sundays. I've never asked her not to. Whatever he did to me, he's hers to work out, and I won't take that from her the way he tried to take my own family from me. My medical record has a note in it now, in my own words, correcting the account, alongside Dr. Ruiz's assessment. The portal is mine again. I read my own messages. I got the hearing aids. And I'll tell you, half of what looked like an old man losing the thread at that table was an old man who simply couldn't hear his family talking over one another. I sleep better. I set down the evening bourbon. I talked to somebody about Marion on Tuesdays, which I resisted for 3 years and should have done in the first month. Sal got his raise. Finally, last month, he cried a little and blamed his allergies, and I let him. The men call me Walt again, all of them, even the young ones. The box cutters stay in my hand. It's a small thing, and it isn't small at all, being seen once more as a man who knows his own tools. There's a second set of eyes on the books now. Pre is firm, quarterly, and a plain rule I wrote and taped inside the office door. No vendor gets paid that nobody in this store can point on a shelf. I'd rather have had that rule than the $94,000. I'd rather have had my son than either. You don't always get to choose which lessons you pay for. People want me to have a clean feeling about all this, and I don't. I have a used feeling, the way a good tool feels after a hard job. Still working, but marked by it. I love my son, and I still do, and he stole from me and tried to erase my mind to cover it. And I did not stop loving him, and I did not let him win. I've had to learn to hold both without letting either one cancel the other out. Here's the only lesson I'll allow myself, and I'll keep it short, the way Marion liked things. There's a difference between helping a parent and erasing one. Helping asks what you want. Erasing decide for you and calls it love. If you're ever lucky enough to grow old, guard the small door of your own voice, because the people who close it will almost always do it gently and tell you it's your own good and mean it and be wrong. I still lock up the store myself most nights. The deadbolt makes a small iron cough when it seats. I feel it in my wrist. I notice it every single time. Notion AI finished. Copied code to clipboard.